Hello, I'm so glad you're here to learn about After Effects with me, Greg Twigg. We are going to start off with some potentially very boring elements, however, very critical to understand that getting some control of these applications that we're using for our digital design work, it's important to know what's under the hood, how to make sure that we are managing the components of the software and making it interface with our computers as best as we can. Then also how to troubleshoot things down the road, knowing where to look to make slight changes, adjustments, customize things for us while we work, etc. This reminds me of when my daughter was taking driver's ed, and the instructor sent the students home to work with their families to learn how to change the oil, learn how to fix a flat, change a tire, and how to replace a light bulb, headlight, etc. And these are similar things that I'm going over with you guys today. So bear with me. I'll try to cruise through only the really important and pertinent things. So don't skip this. This is important. I'm going to look at After Effects preferences. So I just opened up After Effects. This is actually the first time I've opened up After Effects on this machine. So it's going to look like any of you who maybe have never opened it before. A little welcome screen pops up and wants you to get started somehow. We're not actually going to create a composition or a project yet. We're just going to look at After Effects preferences. And that's found under the After Effects menu item in the toolbar. So we're going to go into basically general. However, you could jump to any specific area that you wanted to if you knew what you were going for. But if we just open up general, it takes us to the first page of preferences, and now you can see that there's a bar along the left side that has all of those different areas available for us so we can jump to as well. But I'm only going to talk about a few things like I said. The rest of them, if you're interested, look it up or experiment and see what happens. Path, point, and handle size, 5. Like, what does that mean? Well, if you're dealing with a path, like a Bezier curve, you're creating a path with a pen tool, or maybe you're creating a shape. The handle size is really just like how big on the screen would you like that to be. Sometimes they're very small and hard to get. So you could increase the size of this little tiny dot to something that seems more visible and recognizable while you work. Could be handy. Start off with 5. It's the default. They obviously assumed that it was the best size to start off with. But if you have if you're a little hard of not hearing, seeing, if you need things to be larger, then go ahead and pop that up. Tooltips are great. Tooltips mean if I hover over a certain tool, a little pop-up window kind of comes up and says, hey, this is the pen tool, and it's G on your keyboard. So things like that are good. However, what to know is if you're trying to optimize performance for your machine and the way that After Effects is going to work with it, you could turn that off and it won't have to think about those things, freeing up a little bit of RAM and computation time and space by having it off. If you don't feel like you need tooltips, turn them off. I don't need them because I know all about it. You might want them. Create layers at composition start time. This is good. However, there may be a point where you're like, no, I want my layers to actually be where my playhead is, or whatever. Playhead meaning that moment in time where your little scrubber bar might be. So that's something you could come back and turn off. Switches affect nested comps. Ooh, this is a new one and it's really great. That means that if you've got a project and you have a composition, a workspace with all the layers and all the things, but maybe one of those layers is another composition with more layers and things in it, that buttons of making it look better or perform a certain way, or blurs or whatever, will go and follow that path to other comps that are inside of there. We'll get to that later. We're gonna pen tool. Nope, we're not gonna really change any of this stuff. The default work on this general area is really set up in a way that is handy for us. Play sound when render finishes, things like this. When you render out your animation or your motion piece, the After Effects will play this sound, and sometimes if your speaker's on loud, it'll scare the crap out of you because everything's quiet and you're sort of in a zen place watching the little progress of your movie happen, and all of a sudden it finishes and goes bring, and you're like, ah! So you could turn that off. Also, there's a hack. You can get into the system files and put your own sounds in there so that when it renders, you could have, Bob's Burger quotes or something play. Shortcut keys are most excellent. I'll be teaching you those as we go along. Enable home screen. That's the thing that pops up at the beginning every time you open After Effects. It's lovely, but if you don't want it, you can turn that off. So this is all just sort of general stuff. We're going to move on to the next tabs. Previews, adaptive resolution limit. Adaptive resolution means how much RAM and video card CPU are we wanting to use as we are doing previews, like scrubbing along our work. You can change that so that it performs higher or even lower if you're feeling like things are a little sluggish. So that's really all we need to look at here. Display. You can turn off your motion path. It's the little drawn path of what objects are moving along your screen, but you don't really have to do that. So we don't need to change anything here. This is all good. Importing. Okay, this is a good area. Still footage. So let's say that you import a photograph or a logo or something, and you want to bring that into your project's composition. Typically, if you brought that photo in and it's set to length of composition, and my composition's 2 minutes and 30 seconds, that means that photo is going to be 2 minutes and 30 seconds long, and it's typically not something that you would want. Usually what I tell my students to do is to change that to a time duration that is a little more manageable, and a default of like 5 seconds would be great. And this, we're reading time code from right to left, and it is frames, seconds, minutes, and hours. So 500 is 5 seconds. Sequence footage, 30 frames per second. If you bring in a sequence of images that's like stop motion or something like that, it'll default to 30 frames per second, and that's great, but we can change that later. Video footage and blah, blah, blah. We don't have to worry about any of this business. This is fine. Outputting, we can skip that. Grids and guides. So if you're dealing with a project and your artwork is mostly green and you want to use the grid for alignment and spacing stuff, the grid is by default green, so you're not going to see it if most of your artwork and backgrounds and stuff like that is green. So then you could change it to a different color that would be like pink or something that would stand out. Same with your guides. Typically, this bright cyan color would be identifiable in most artwork. But again, if you're dealing with a light blue artwork and you've got guides that are that same color, you're not going to see them. It's not going to be that helpful. So you can come here and change that. You can change them all also from being lines to dashed lines or just dots, maybe ways that they're not so intrusive while you work. We don't need to worry about safe margin. Labels, you can label all of your elements in your composition, and right now all these things have different colors. You can change them if you want to, or change the name of it. Disk cache. Disk cache is dealing with storage of information on your hard drive while you work. So it's like it's not really RAM, but it's kind of like RAM. It's taking temporary use of available space on your computer in order to save images, render frames, and stuff like that, just to make the performance of your computer better. If you had another hard drive in your computer dedicated for data and stuff like that, and it's separate than your operating system drive, then I would point it to that other drive. So most of us only have one drive, maybe. Some of us who are a little more savvy have partitioned a drive, or at least have multiple drives in their computer for these reasons. One dedicated just for system, software, etc. operations, another one for all of our workspace and bigger files and stuff. So that's manageable here, and that's ideal. We don't have to worry about anything else. Our video preview, we don't need to worry about that. Appearance, you can change the appearance of things like handles, or maybe even the overall brightness of windows and things. They used to have everything really kind of bright like this. In fact, it was a lot brighter. But they realized that it was better for our eyes to see color and contrast and stuff if we had a darker neutral background. So you can change all of this stuff depending on your own preference. That's why they call it preferences. So then a new project, you don't have to worry about that. Auto saving, yes, make sure auto save is on. It's really helpful because things crash all the time, right? So if you're not good at saving manually, then the autosave is really helpful. You can change how often those autosaves happen. 20 minutes might be, too long. If you're doing a lot of intensive, fast work, you could change that to something like 10 minutes. I'll leave mine at 20. Memory and performance. So everyone has RAM, which is the memory in our computers. Some of us have a lot. Some of us don't have very much. And so After Effects needs RAM in order to really function well. A lot of the magic happens by using RAM. It's a good time, if you're serious about getting into this, to upgrade your RAM to something that's more rockstar-like and more, contemporary. So get some RAM if you can. It's so cheap now and fantastic, and most computers will accept quite a bit of RAM. Just know what your specs are for your not for your operating system, but for your computer itself, and just don't exceed it. Make sure you do it properly with twin pairs and all of that. But you can change the RAM reserved for other applications while you're working here. So I only have 16 gigabytes in this MacBook Pro. I wish it would more, but that's what I got. So you can reserve a specific amount of RAM for other applications while you're working in After Effects to make sure that your operating system is going to function, and maybe you have Photoshop open as well, or Illustrator or something like that, or maybe you're browsing the internet. You're just saving some of the RAM for those other applications so that they have some to use, but you're dedicating the majority of the RAM for After Effects while you work, which means it's in your best interest to not have a lot of other programs open while you're doing After Effects, except for the ones you absolutely need. So maybe you don't need Mail on. Close the Mail app. Maybe you don't need a movie player open or something like that, or you don't need Premiere while you're doing After Effects work. Just think about managing your stuff while you're working. Audio hardware, if you had different outputs, you can change that here. Like my office computer, I have a really nice sound system set up, and so I made sure that when I render, I'm not coming out of my iMac, I'm coming out of the good speakers, and so you can change that here. I wouldn't want it to come out of a microphone, that would be insane. Audio mapping, nope, don't have to worry about sync settings, not something we have to worry about either. Our text, you can change the font menus to be a little bit bigger and stuff if you need help seeing that. Scripting and expressions, we'll get into expressions later. This is just going to look like nonsense right now. In fact, we'll get into it just a tiny bit. It's fine. And then we do have some information about 3D stuff, but it's like about your mouse and how you want to navigate your camera and stuff like that. We will be doing just a tiny bit of 3D, but I don't think that we're going to have to get into this at all. So that is basically looking under the hood and how to optimize After Effects to work with your computer and make it work with you, the user, the maker, as best as you can. And then just knowing that this is here and to come back and change stuff as you need to is the best part. So there we go. We looked under the hood on a few things. Obviously, there's a lot more, but most of it is kind of irrelevant unless you get really heavy into this stuff. So take the time to do that, and we'll get into more exciting stuff here soon. Thanks.